Imagine protecting someone who drinks $1,000 liquor while your neighbors collapse from hunger, unable to find even a handful of corn. This was the daily reality for a North Korean elite guard, who stood just 10 meters from Kim Jong Un, in a country where the average monthly salary equals less than the price of a single Starbucks coffee. This man had access to the regime's darkest secrets and its most lavish excesses. Today, he reveals the staggering contrast between power and poverty that drove him to risk everything, including an assassination attempt that could have changed history. Subscribe to understand the reality behind the world's most isolated economy and the human stories hidden within the statistics. I was born and raised in a small fishing village in South Hamgyong province, where the blue sea breeze never stopped blowing. Even now, I can almost smell the dried pollock my mother used to roast over the fire pit. But behind that peaceful scene, there were always invisible eyes watching every move. I was physically strong and sharp-eyed. That's what caught the state's attention. One day, officials from Pyongyang showed up at our house. They told me I'd been selected as a bodyguard for the Supreme Leader's security detail. In North Korea, being chosen for the guard command was the highest honor a family could receive. My parents wiped away tears while neighbors congratulated them with envy. I truly believed sacrificing myself for the country was the right path. But what I thought was a door to glory turned out to be a cold machine with no trace of humanity. The day I left for the special training camp outside Pyongyang, I couldn't even say a proper goodbye to my parents. As the truck drove away, I watched my hometown shrink into a dot, my mother's white headscarf disappearing in the distance. That helpless feeling still haunts me. The moment I entered the base, the name I'd carried my whole life vanished, and the person we were sworn to protect was never called by name. Among security officers, he was only known by a secret code, Comrade No. 7. That was the covert designation used by the protection detail speaking. The leader's actual name was considered blasphemy. Every day we exchanged hundreds of orders concerning Comrade No. 7's safety. Life at the training facility was designed to erase our humanity. Every morning at 4 a.m., we'd wake up in bone-chilling cold and march dozens of kilometers through the mountains. At the shooting range, we were expected to hit targets without making a sound. We memorized Comrade No. 7's security routes and emergency evacuation paths thousands of times. Not a single second of error was tolerated. Not one misstep. My senior officer was ruthless. Any sign of weakness meant brutal, verbal abuse and beatings. He was obsessed with protocol and kept repeating, "You're not human beings with emotions. You're human shields, ready to explode at any moment to protect Comrade No. 7. As I was transformed into a robot that moved only on command, I'd sometimes look up at the night sky and cry in secret. Being separated from loved ones, living without a name, just a number. The misery is hard to put into words. My parents back home probably thought their son was doing important work in Pyongyang, eating well and living comfortably. But the truth? I was walking on thin ice every single day, a heavy rifle on my back. Back then, I'd been brainwashed into thinking this was loyalty to the motherland, a way to bring honor to my family. I didn't realize that Comrade No. 7, the man I was sacrificing my youth and soul to protect was actually the key to a massive chain suffocating our people. I thought I was a protector, but as time passed, one thought kept returning. I was nothing more than a precision tool, designed to maintain someone's power. My loyalty to Comrade No. 7 began to waver. A massive change swept across North Korea. Kim Jong Un had taken power. Once he seized control, the atmosphere in the Guard Command became unbearably tense. From close range, I witnessed a chilling truth. The leader had no interest in the people's lives. He talked about serving the people, but in reality, he used tens of thousands of lives as tools to protect himself. My faith began to crack. Deep inside Pyongyang's Grand Palace, what I saw was pure terror politics. Kim Jong Un purged senior officials, even his own blood relatives, to consolidate power. The tension in the security unit reached a breaking point. Our perimeter expanded several times over. Surveillance officers from the protection department shadowed our every move, recording even our breathing. A colleague I'd joked with the day before would vanish without a trace by morning. When that happened, heavy silence filled the barracks. We avoided each other's eyes and just stared straight ahead. Then one day, A strange rumor started circulating in the sealed-off air of the base. The protection department tried to suppress it, but the story spread like a secret code among us guards. There had been an internal assassination attempt on Comrade No. 7. When I heard that, my heart raced like a broken machine. The thought hit me, someone else besides me wanted to end this monster. A shiver ran through my entire body. That rumor shocked me, but it also gave me a strange sense of comfort. The person we were risking our lives to protect was, to someone else, a target that had to be eliminated. That realization struck deep. At the time, all of North Korea was suffering from starvation. News from my hometown in South Hamgyong province was horrific. Neighbors were collapsing, swollen from hunger, unable to find even a handful of corn. Children were becoming street urchins, wandering the roads. Meanwhile, the man I was guarding enjoyed lavish feasts and drank $1,000 liquor. My loyalty turned to rage. People were dying while I was supposed to be a human shield for him. It was disgusting. One evening, standing behind him at a banquet, I gripped my rifle tightly for the first time. In my mind, I'd already pulled the trigger thousands of times. If Comrade No. 7 were gone, maybe my parents and our people could escape this hellish poverty. That thought consumed me. They say thoughts fire faster than bullets. My soul had already aimed at him and squeezed the trigger. Outwardly, I was a loyal guard. Inside, I was a volcano about to erupt. That burning rage pushed me toward a dangerous plan. Once my vague anger hardened into a firm decision, every day felt like a tightly drawn bowstring. Being a guard command officer looked prestigious, but in reality, we lived under ironclad surveillance with no room to breathe. Targeting the Supreme Leader's life was a reckless gamble, not just with my own life, but with 3 generations of my family. But my mind was made up. I worked even more diligently than before, earning my superiors' trust. I lowered myself like a loyal hunting dog. To get close to Comrade No. 7's heart, I first had to become his most trusted shield. The first step was finding a tiny gap in this fortress-like security system. The routes the leader traveled were protected by layers of security. Our radio communication codes and terminology changed. Constantly, even insiders struggled to grasp the full picture. I volunteered for night shifts and carefully observed the command center's reporting structure. Then one day, heaven seemed to help me. A golden opportunity appeared. I briefly accessed a top-secret document containing Comrade No. 7's weekly undisclosed movements, shared only among Corps Guard Command officials. Under normal circumstances, I couldn't have touched it. But when the duty officer stepped away for a moment, I memorized the contents like taking a photograph. The moment I saw that document, cold sweat poured down my spine. It detailed exactly when the leader would pass through which door, where he'd exit his vehicle down to the minute. I mentally rehearsed the position where I'd pull the trigger, and my escape route hundreds of times. But I couldn't do it alone. I desperately needed an accomplice outside to receive my signal and help me escape. One person came to mind, a fellow soldier I was close with, like a brother. He often vented his frustration. Why are we protecting a fat pig instead of starving people? Of course, trusting anyone in North Korea was a life-or-death risk. A comrade you shared warmth with yesterday could turn informant today and hold a knife to your throat. That's Pyongyang. After days of deliberation, I carefully tested him. Instead of speaking directly, I mentioned my parents' hunger back home and the system's injustice. His eyes trembled violently. It wasn't the look of a traitor. It was fierce determination, born from deep despair. I took a life-or-death gamble and hinted at my plan. Without a word, he gripped my hand tightly. To avoid suspicion, we used a small device. It looked like an ordinary car key, but inside was a miniature communication tool for secretly exchanging the date and location of our operation. Every night, lying on my cold barrack bed, I'd fidget with that key and ask the heavens, would this be my lifeline or the doorknob to the afterlife? I regretted not being able to bow one last time to my parents before choosing this dangerous path. But I was convinced someone had to break this bloody cycle. This wasn't personal revenge. It was my last shred of human dignity, an attempt to end an abnormal world where tens of millions suffered for one man's insane power. While maintaining my weapon, I made a vow tomorrow. Everything would change. Even if I failed, I wouldn't die as a slave. With that heavy yet burning resolve, Pyongyang's night deepened. I had already crossed a river with no return. The day of reckoning finally arrived. That morning, Pyongyang's sky hung unusually low, as if sleet would pour down any moment. I woke earlier than usual and checked my weapons again and again. Wiping the cold sweat from my palms on my pants, I stared straight into my own eyes in the mirror. What I saw wasn't a hunting dog of the regime. Anymore, it was a man determined to change the fate of a nation. My heart pounded like it would burst. But outwardly, I appeared calmer than anyone as I joined the security formation. Today's operations site was a secret banquet hall on the outskirts of Pyongyang. Comrade No. 7 was hosting foreign delegates for a celebration. While people survived on grassroots inside that hall, the smell of greasy meat and singing never stopped. Thinking about it made rage surge to the top of my head. Based on the route I'd obtained in advance, I confirmed where I'd be stationed. A short 10 meters the distance, from where the leader would exit his car to the entrance of the banquet hall, that was the kill zone I'd marked. But as soon as I arrived, I had an ominous feeling something was wrong. Security personnel had doubled. Protection Department agents prowled with predatory eyes, searching every corner. The field commander kept shouting, suddenly changing the positions of guards. Instead of my assigned spot, I was pushed to a corner far from the leader's route. My mind went blank, the plan had leaked. But there was no turning back now. The leader's armored vehicle, sleek and black, glided in. My finger was already trembling near the trigger. The car door opened, and Comrade numbered 7 appeared. I held my breath, ready to pull out my concealed weapon. But at that instant, a senior guard grabbed my shoulder hard. "Not this way, move over there!" A sharp command. The route had changed faster than expected. Before I could make a move, the leader disappeared into a wall of human shields formed by layers of guards. That single second, that brief moment, completely split my life in two. The operation failed. No, what was more terrifying than failure was realizing our plan had been in the Protection Department's palm all along, leaked from within. The atmosphere around the banquet hall turned hostile instantly. In the distance, I saw one of my comrades being dragged away without a sound. My heart dropped to my feet. It's over. I can't even run now. Despair washed over me. He was probably inside laughing, but outside, I now failed. Assassin had to endure a fear colder than any gun barrel. Looking at the Protection Department agents closing in around me, I knew before tonight ends, my name will be on the purge list. My parents back home won't be safe either. That 1-second misalignment brought such a brutal consequence. I stood there, a failed assassin, trembling in Pyongyang's cold. Wind mixed with rain. I could almost hear my comrades' screams. I wanted to put a gun to my own chest, but I couldn't. A final instinct awakened. I had to survive and tell the world about this tragedy. I hurriedly left and disappeared into the darkness. Now I was no longer a protector. I was prey. I didn't even have time to question whether what I tried to protect was justice or just reckless rebellion. Only one thought drove me stay alive and cross the border. Right after the failed operation, the scene turned into chaos, suppressing the fear that made my blood run backwards. I rejoined the formation as if nothing had happened. Immediately, an emergency assembly order was issued across the entire guard command. One by one, we were called into interrogation rooms. As my turn approached, my heart pounded harder. My shirt was soaked with cold sweat. The Protection Department interrogator's eyes were like a snake's. As he scrutinized me, demanding why I'd left my assigned position, who I'd contacted. Outside the interrogation room, screams never stopped. Comrades I'd trained and laughed with just yesterday were being dragged out covered in blood. I knew right then there was no safe place here anymore. The noose around my neck would only tighten with time. Luckily, my previously diligent attitude helped me pass the first investigation. But the Protection Department's suspicion wasn't something to take lightly. Back in my quarters, I stayed awake all night, watching out the window. The sound of Protection Department vehicles constantly entering and leaving the base was suffocating. At dawn the next day, hearing Protection Department agents rifling through my belongings, I had to make a decision. Sitting here waiting to be arrested was suicide. The moment they caught me, my parents back home would also be branded as a traitor's family and dragged to a political prison camp, never to see sunlight again for the rest of their lives. The horrifying fear of guilt by association moved my feet. I put the dagger and small pistol I'd hidden for emergencies into my jacket and slipped out through a back door that only guards knew about. Now I wasn't a guard. Anymore, I was the most dangerous fugitive who'd betrayed the country. Wanted posters with my face started appearing throughout Pyongyang. Every checkpoint received strict orders to capture me. What was more terrifying than hunger and cold was the constant pressure of not knowing when or where Protection Department agents might burst in. I spent nights in sewers with rats, chewing rotten food. I endured it for one reason: if I survived and crossed the border, I could tell the world about this regime's cruelty. Maybe someday I could even get a chance to save my parents. That thread of hope. Even while running, guilt ate at my soul like poison. Thinking about colleagues who'd suffer because of me tore my heart apart. But if I died here, their sacrifice would be buried forever. So I dragged my bleeding feet northward. The cold current of the Yalu River awaited me, but my steps toward the freedom beyond couldn't stop. I was no longer a protector. I was fighting a desperate battle to survive. After that day, deep sleep left my life forever. The journey north from Pyongyang was a constant game of hide-and-seek with death. My name had already topped the Protection Department's kill list. Orders were issued to shoot me on sight at every post nationwide. Taking a train would be suicide, so I mostly traveled through steep mountain ridges at night. My toenails fell out. My body was scratched bloody by thorn bushes. But the tension was so extreme I couldn't even feel the pain. Then, near a village, I happened to obtain a newspaper. My heart froze solid. In a corner of the newspaper, my family's names from my hometown were listed as investigation subjects. The terrifying yoke of guilt by association had begun to strangle my parents and siblings. With every step I took toward freedom, my family back home was being pushed one step closer to the death camps. The temptation to turn back to Pyongyang and surrender tormented me. But I knew better than anyone going back wouldn't save my family. I bit my lip and swallowed tears of blood. In the hopeless darkness, all I could rely on was the small communication device I'd prepared when plotting the operation. I took out that object, disguised cleverly as a car key, and sent a final signal. Would it connect? What if this was also a trap? Fear gripped me. But soon, a faint vibration and a brief signal came through. I broke down crying like an animal. The contact person who'd agreed to help me from inside was still alive. He gave me the location of a hideout near the border, and the last route to break through the tight surveillance. But even that contact couldn't be fully trusted. In North Korea, yesterday's comrade becomes today's informant all the time. Even as I headed to the location he provided, I constantly looked back, checking for traps. I chewed on discarded, rotten corn husks to ease my hunger. When thirsty, I gulped muddy water from puddles. My appearance was no longer human, but my eyes remained as sharp as the day I aimed at Comrade No. 7's heart. I kept asking myself, was my choice driving my family to death, or would it become a small spark to bring down this regime? That guilt still feels like a sharp knife cutting through my chest. But if I stopped here, my comrade's sacrifice and my family's suffering would all become meaningless tragedy. I squeezed out my last remaining strength and hid myself near Hysan, where I could see the Yalu River. The faint lights across the river seemed to beckon me. Now only one final gamble remained, breaking through the border. I finally reached the area near Hysan, where the cold wind from the Yalu River cut through skin. Just across lay the freedom I'd longed for. But the border surveillance was more intense than I'd imagined. The Protection Department had anticipated my route. They'd set up guard posts every few hundred meters along the riverbank, searchlights constantly sweeping. I pressed my body flat into the reed thicket, gasping for breath. I'd gone days without food and my strength was gone. But the fear that getting caught here would end everything kept my mind sharp. Then it happened. Static crackled from the small radio in my jacket, followed by a voice. Calling Comrade No. 7. Calling Comrade No. 7. My heart nearly stopped. That was the code word I used to call the leader. But it was also my identification number that the Protection Department used to track me as a deserter. The voice on the other end belonged to my former superior, who'd once cared for me like a son. He calmly promised that if I surrendered, they'd spare my life. But I knew better than anyone how big a lie that was. They didn't want to save me. They wanted to prevent the Guard Command's top-secret information I possessed from leaking out. Hearing my number on the radio, I recalled all the security protocols and code words I'd memorized early on, like a slideshow. What had once been my pride had now become chains strangling me. I threw the radio to the ground and smashed it. At that moment, I decided I was no longer Comrade No. 7's shield or their hunting dog just a human being who wanted to live. But the pursuit was closing in. From behind I heard military boots and barking dogs. Even the sky seemed to abandon me. A full moon rose brightly through the clouds. On the open riverbank, moonlight was my most terrifying enemy. I used my last remaining strength and dove into the river. The ice-cold water hitting my chest nearly made me scream, but I desperately covered my mouth and started swimming. Dozens of bullets tore through the water behind me, one grazing my shoulder. But I didn't have time to feel the pain. Halfway across the river, I looked up at the sky and asked, would I reach the other side, or would this cold river become my grave? At that moment, even the heavens felt like my enemy. Everything seemed like a cliff. But I fixed my eyes on a small, twinkling light across the river and thrashed my arms like a madman. That desperation at death's threshold, I'll never forget it. That's how I crossed the Yalu River, mixed with blood and tears, barely making it over that irreversible border. The moment I set foot on Chinese soil, the one who helped me was, unexpectedly, a Chinese merchant I'd secretly connected with during my guard command days. He risked danger and hid me in his warehouse for 2 weeks. Every night, when I heard police sirens outside the warehouse, I gripped my pistol and held my breath. Thanks to the fake ID and shabby workers' clothes he provided, I managed to board a slow train during a gap in surveillance and traveled down to Yunnan province in southern China. There, I handed over my wristwatch and gold, trinkets, everything I had to a local broker, and only then could I meet a guide who'd lead me through the jungle. Following that guide over Laos's treacherous mountains was pure hell. The jungle teemed with snakes and poisonous insects. After days of walking without food, I would have collapsed if not for the special training I'd received in Pyongyang. In a safe house in Laos, with help from an unnamed activist, I hid in the cargo bed of a truck heading toward the Mekong River. In hot, humid air that reeked of waste, I endured 2 full days of travel. Finally, I relied on an old ferry and crossed into Thailand through night fog. The sound of the river seemed like Protection Department pursuers' footsteps. My heart nearly stopped. Even after reaching Thai soil, the ordeal wasn't over. Following the guide's instructions, I turned myself in to local police and was detained in a foreigner detention center. In that cramped, filthy facility, I spent nearly a month trembling with fear, wondering if I'd be sent back to North Korea. But then someone saved me, a consular official dispatched from the South Korean embassy. When the official showed me a badge with the Taeguk flag through the visiting room window, I finally realized I'd crossed death's threshold. I collapsed to the floor and wept. On my first night in South Korea, I could only fall asleep with all the lights on. When darkness came, it felt like protection. Department agents would burst through the door any second. That chilling voice from the radio echoed in my ears. Even in my sleep, I'd bolt upright at phantom orders to protect Comrade No. 7. It was a brutal fight with my former self. But as time passed, I gradually understood above my head. Instead of surveillance eyes, there was now an open window I could look out any time I wanted. The solid barbed wire that imprisoned me was gone. Now, a window letting in cool night air welcomed me. Now I confess I'm a failed assassin. I didn't eliminate my target. I wasted the most brilliant years of my life as a tool to protect him. But I'm the only witness who survived to speak. I witnessed the illusion from the deepest part of power. Standing here on free soil after crossing the line of death, I am the proof. The regime created the assassin, but revealing the truth is now my responsibility. If my story resonates even a little in your hearts, that's enough. I hope that when you look at me, you'll remember how precious the freedom we enjoy truly is. Thank you. Did the confession of a failed assassin, that voice of truth, touch your heart? Your subscriptions and likes give great strength to revealing more hidden truths from that land. I hope you have a precious day. Thank you.